All right, welcome back to Tech Entrepreneurship. I'm Aaron Chavez. I hope everyone had a great weekend. We're talking today about one of the most important aspects of building your business and growing your business and funding your business. It's called valuation. Valuation. And you say to yourself, well, Aaron, how do I value a company when it's just an idea in my head? How do I value this if I've just barely gotten a proof of concept? How do I value this if I've just gone through that proof of concept? How do I value this company if there are no revenues? Well, this is the beauty about valuation. Some of you might say, well, it's worth nothing. The accountant in you might say, well, it's worth nothing. Well, really? Is that true of Google or Facebook or Apple? I mean, when they start out, imagine being able to invest some money into them. I heard a story the other day about someone who was able to invest into Microsoft early on. The first $1,000, $10,000, and the initial investment was $1,000. And they passed on it. And this was several years ago, but they passed on it. What was the valuation at that point? It was subjective. It was arbitrary. It was not a science. It was art. And at this level, when you start up your business, it's all about subjectiveness. What's it worth to you? And what's somebody willing to pay in terms of a valuation to get into it? So let me start from the beginning here. Valuation, we know, is number one, subjective. But there are ways that we can start nailing down this moving target. There are ways that we can start building and creating value. But before we get there, because I have this happen all the time. In fact, I was just meeting with some students the other day. They had a fantastic concept, great concept, and they had actually done some prototypes. And then they had actually taken it a step further and started selling the product. And they said that an individual that they knew gave them $1,000 for 15% of the company. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. So you did a valuation on your company? And they said, no, we haven't done a valuation yet. And I said, yes, you did. Yes, you did. You just put a value on your company and you just sold a percentage of that to an investor. And they said, well, are you sure? And I said, of course I'm sure. And they said, but we didn't talk about that. And I said, it doesn't matter because you have accepted money. You have accepted funds. And that individual saw what you were building. And they just took 15% of your company for $1,000, giving you a valuation of $6,666. That's what you valued your company with when you decided to sell them equity. And they looked at each other and said, whoa, what? and we started talking about it, and I figured in my head, I didn't mention this to them, but I honestly believe that they are sitting on a real valuation of their business as is, meaning what they could start raising money at of about $100,000. $100,000 is where and that's a worst case scenario number. I like to work off of worst case scenarios. And they just sold 15% of their business for $1,000. Instead of 15% and putting in $15,000, they got $1,000 for 15%. They looked at each other dumbfounded. So you've got to understand that valuation is critical to you and your partners. It's critical to your future. It's one of the first things you need to start thinking about when you start up your venture. Now, let's take another step back. You know, it's like playing football. This is like playing football. In order to go forward, you have to take a couple of steps back. You hike the ball, and you take a couple of steps back, and you scan the field. Well, there are two ways that you can bring in money. And we've already identified them. Debt or equity. Pen is running out of ink. Debt or equity. The question I have for you is, what do you want as a startup? Do you want to take on debt, or do you want to take on equity from investors? Do you want to take on debt from somebody who's loaning you money, or do you want to take on equity? I want to give you a second to think about that. Debt or equity, you're starting up your business. What is it that you want from your friends, family, and fools? We've identified the 4Fs, right? You have friends, family, fools, and founders. So you're one of the founders. Do you want to put money into the company, or do you want to have individuals put money into the company and that be a loan, or do you want it to be ownership? What is the answer? Think in your head. The answer is equity. I don't want you to take a loan out, because what happens is when you take on debt, you have to repay that. And not only do you have to repay it, but you have to put up collateral. You have to put up an asset to secure it. You have to put up an asset to secure it. The positive with debt, though, would be that you own 100% of the business. The negative is, if that business fails, not only do you not have any money, but you just lost the collateral to the lien holder, whoever it is. Your friends, family, and fools. Uncle Jane is now going to take your asset or assets that you collateralized. Aunt Jane is going to take that and sell it to get her money back. You also want equity because you have people willing to take risks. And you have people that want you to succeed. Not that the lien holder or the lender doesn't want you to succeed. Absolutely they do, because they want to get paid back. But the reality of it is, you've got more people to source ideas and information from, not just a silent partner. You can actually bounce things off of them, and they have an interest in telling you, obviously, the right decision, the path that you should take.
There's a saying that I want you to know, and this is very applicable to a startup. In the beginner's mind, there are many options. In the experts, there are but a few. And I believe this is a Chinese analect or saying. What I'm here to tell you is that you're going to have a lot of people that are going to be wanting to invest in your business. You're going to be wanting them to invest in your business. The path is going to be critical. Take the equity path. That way, if the business does fail, you don't have to repay them that money. They're taking risk with you. They are taking risk with you. They're investing with you and they're taking risk with you. So, when we're talking about debt and equity, we're talking about what we call the treasury function of a business. Let's build this pie out here. Early on, I don't know that it's a very good idea that you take on any debt. I don't like it. Now, it's okay, let me qualify this. It's perfectly okay as founders to loan the business money. That's okay. Okay, that's okay. Founders, I'm going to qualify here. Founders, why is it okay? I just told you don't take any loans out, but I'm telling you that founders may loan the business money. And the reason for this is you've already established your equity position. Let's just say there are two people, and I don't recommend a 50-50 split ever. I don't recommend a 50-50 split ever. It needs to be at a minimum 51-49. With two partners, %, 49%. All right? This is 100% of the equity in the business. Now, let's say that you decide that you need to invest into the company. You need to buy some cogs. You need to buy some raw materials. So again, we're looking at the treasury function. And right now, 100% of this is equity. But you decide to loan the business $10,000. And let's just say so now you've got $10,000 that represents, let's just say, 10% of the equity and the debt together. So you've got the valuation of the business of $100,000 now, and you loan the business $10,000, so that represents 10%. 90% of the business is owned. 10% of it is loaned. Have you ever heard of a business going under because they grew too fast or because they had too much debt and they couldn't pay it off? That means their debt was a lot more than 10%. Their debt may have been 75%, 85% in terms of what the business was worth and how much debt they had loaned against the business. And the reason why I don't mind founders loaning the business money is because when the profits of the business are being paid back to the founders, that $10,000 is going to come back in the form of a loan. So you're not going to get taxed on it. You're not going to get taxed on it. So if you loan your business, and you need to understand this, if you loan your business any amount of money, before you get taxed, you're going to pay yourself back. And then once the loan is paid off, then you get into dividends or distributions, and that's where you're going to be taxed at the applicable tax rate for a dividend. So when you loan the business money, you're legally okay to not tax yourself on a dividend or a distribution until your loan is paid off. Okay? Until your loan is paid off. Now the interest, if you charge yourself interest, the interest on that loan is taxable because there's a gain. But the first $10,000, if that's what you loan, is not taxable. Now, if you repaid yourself and the interest has been accruing over time, and you paid yourself $10,500, well, the $500 is taxable. The $500 is taxable. Now, we have a pretty good understanding here of the treasury function. I don't want you to take out a loan from investors. I don't mind you taking out a loan from yourself if you're a founder. You need to have skin in the game. You need to have skin in the game. But you don't want to lever the company up so much that it's burdened by the interest payments and the debt. And that's why businesses go under, is because they lever themselves to a point where the interest payments are so high. And maybe you know somebody where this has happened, where the amount of debt that they have is so high that all they are doing every month is paying off the interest and a little principal. And it seems like they're never going to get out. And they may end up decaying or going bankrupt. So a little bit of debt from the founders is okay. A lot of debt from non-founders is not okay. So the point being, I want you, if your service, product, whatever it is, has legs, I want you to put a valuation on the company and start raising money through equity. Well, how do I do that, Aaron? It's just an idea. Just as you said in the beginning, it's just an idea. It's this pie in the sky. It's subjective. It's arbitrary. It's in the eye of the beholder. Let me show you. We could go through all the DCF, discounted cash flows, and all this jazz. Projections are just that. They're made-up numbers. They're fictitious. Well, Aaron, I on a conservative basis, I anticipate that in the first 12 months, if I have $100,000, I'll be able to generate $1 million in revenue. the next 12 months I should be able to do 10 million in revenue, and then the next 12 months I should be able to do 100 million in revenue. I mean, I see those numbers all the time. Or I might see, well, we'll do 100,000 this year, we'll do 400,000 next year, we'll do 1.2 million the year after. That may sound more reasonable, but it's all made up. It doesn't matter, it's all made up. So how do you come up with a valuation? If I'm saying that your numbers, and you do need to do numbers, and we'll get into that in a future class, but how do you start with a valuation? If the venture capitalist or the angel investor or even one of the 3S is saying, well, the numbers sound great, but that's a little too high for me. It's a little too far out. Here's how you do it. What is that a symbol of? This is a beta. And a beta is a test. A beta is a test. You have to build out your widget. You have to prototype out your widget, which is why ASU has the Startup Labs, one of the best prototyping facilities, instructors, and individuals so that you can build out your product. If it's not a product, let's just say it's a service, you still need to do a beta. You need to do a beta because you need to go through the proof of concept. And you need to be able to tell your potential investors, hey, listen, it's not just an idea anymore. I have created the actual prototype. I have, let's just say it's not so high tech. Let's just say it's a pest control business. Well, you know what you need to do? You need to spend a little money and buy some equipment and see if you can do it. And see if you can, what the price points are that people are willing to pay for your specific service. With a prototype, what are people, you're going to find things out that you never would have dreamed of, even though you thought you knew. By doing a prototype, by completing a beta, and going through the proof of concept gives you that leverage and gives you that strength to say, this works. It's not just conceptual. It works. I have proven it. I need to now throw some gasoline on the fire. I need to now get this thing moving. I need to move this forward. And now I've got a better idea as to what I believe this is worth. Valuation, step one, valuation. From idea to beta. It doesn't look like a big step, but let me tell you, in my opinion, 98% of all ideas die here. How many of you have come up with an idea and then as time goes on, you have seen it materialize? And you say to yourself, I thought of that. Wait, I thought of that first. People don't know the next step to take. So this is also a lesson in moving forward. After you come up with your aha moment, Your idea is your aha moment. And your aha moment is when that light bulb goes off. And you say, I found a gap in the marketplace. I found a gap. This is the future. This is the next thing. I was on the phone this morning with a student, and I encourage all of you, at this point, from this step forward, for you to email me if you have questions, if you have an idea, if you have a concept, and you're having some trouble. This is what I am here for. To answer your questions and to help you move past this idea stage. People just don't go forward is the problem. They come up with these ideas and they say, oh yeah, well, I don't have the time for that. Oh, I don't have the resources. Oh, I don't know what to do next. This is what to do next. You create the beta. Not only will it get you to the next level, but it will help with evaluation. And it is step 2. This is step 1. That is step 2, the beta. I don't know if you noticed this or not, but this is one of the most critical parts of the class. Getting the prototype done, proving the concept. Because if you can prove the concept, as my tata used to say, now we're cooking with gas. Now we're cooking with gas. I never forget that. He was an inventor. He had a day job. He worked for the railroads. That's what paid the bills. He was an inventor. His mind worked in these circles. He was trying to create something as close to perpetual motion as possible. He knew it wasn't possible. But he believed that it was. He knew in his mind that it wasn't possible, but he believed in his heart that there was a way. That there was a way. And if you think about it, we're not that far off. Many watches operate with perpetual motion, meaning they operate with the movement. But of course, that energy comes from the individual, et cetera, et cetera. But the point being, he was doing betas all the time. He was doing betas all the time. He did not get to a point where he ever felt comfortable in commercializing anything, but he spent a large portion of his entire life in the beta stage, beyond the ideation, trying to prove the concept. That was his passion. That was one of his passions in life. An admirable one at that. He never succeeded. Did he fail? I don't know. I think of all the fun, I remember watching him, I think of all the fun that he had in building these contraptions. I think of all of the knowledge that he gleaned. I think there is a different definition of failure. But he had a blast going through the beta stage. A blast. You need to take that beta stage and run with it. That's how you get to the next level, and that's how you get your valuation. So let me point out to you that Once that leverage comes into you and you have completed that proof of concept, now you can start raising money? No. But you've proven that it works. Now what you want to do is build the story. And you say, well, Aaron, I've got a question. What about the business plan? Well, aren't I supposed to do a business plan? No! Forget the business plan. I've never been inspired enough to want to read a full business plan or write a full business plan. A 30 or 40 page, a venture capitalist doesn't have the time to read a 40 or 50 page business plan. I don't know that you have the time to do it either. But you do have the time to build a story. And you do have the time to build a business map. Whoa, wait a minute. What's a business map? Well, it's somewhat a very condensed version of the business plan. 4 to 6 pages. Do you have time to do 4 to 6 pages of describing the business? The market, the competitors, the founders, and then the financials. These may be separate, 1 to 3 pages. So total is going to be probably 8 to 9 pages total. The business map is going to be 8 to 9 pages total. And here you have the corpus of your proof of concept. You have built in 4 to 6 pages a very condensed version, succinctly lasered in to defining your market, competitors, founders, etc., for a potential investor. Well, now do you raise money? No! When do we get to raise money? I'll tell you when you get to raise money. Don't worry. Step 4 is now all about the capital structure. And the capital structure is linear to the treasury function. The treasury function, if you remember, is how much debt and equity you take on. And not only that, but when. Timing is everything. When you take it on. When you take it on. The capital structure is now going to be how much debt and equity do we have and when. In this case, we're going to have a 51-49 split. And the reason why you do this is so that you don't get logged into a bottleneck. can't make a decision. And the capital structure, I just said 49-51, this is with two partners. You may have more than that. But right now you have no debt. You have a capital structure where 100% of the business is owned by two people, 49-51. When you decide to take on some additional debt or additional investors, then you're really talking about the treasury function of the business. But initially, the capital structure is going to be very simple. And you're going to say, okay, well, I've identified Jane as my partner, 49-51, but we still haven't come up with a valuation yet. That's right, you still have not come up with a valuation. And that's okay. You can only come up with a valuation after you have decided who the primary founders are. And you may refer interchangeably to partners and founders. But not all partners are founders, just so you know. But you may, in the beginning stages, use interchangeably as partners. But not all partners are founders. Well, now can we raise money? No. Quit asking me. No, you can't raise money. You now need to incorporate. And this is still part of step 4. You have identified the partners. And now you need to incorporate. You've identified partners and have agreed on the equity split. And because of this, you can now incorporate. Well, am I going to do an LLC or an S Corp? They're almost identical. An LLC is relatively new. It just came about in the last 20 years. An S Corp has about 80, 90 years of case law behind it. An LLC has articles of organization. An S Corp or a corporation has articles of incorporation. An LLC has units and interests. An S Corp has shares. It's just semantics. So let me put this down. An LLC has articles of organization. They have units or interests. An S Corp has articles of incorporation. And they have shares. Units and interests and shares are just the same thing. But within each entity, they are just called something different. They both are equity definitions. They're the definitions of equity. I can buy into this business as a founder. I can say my equity interest is, say, 49%. And if we have formed an LLC, I can say that my investment is actually an interest or a unit. You can say your investment is an interest or a unit. But how many units, interests, or shares should you when you incorporate shares, units, and we're just going to say units because interest is not that commonly used in terms of the term. How many shares of units should I have? There's only two of us. There's myself and Jane. How many units should I have? Should I have 1,000 or 100 units? That seems reasonable. I mean, there's only two of us, so if I have 100 of them, then I get 51 and Jane gets 49, and there we go. We have our equity split. Let's do that. Sound reasonable? No. I'm here to tell you that your business is going to grow. You're going to take on additional investors. You're going to need more shares, more units. And the pie is expandable. What you have here is an expandable pie because although there's only a finite percentage, it's 100% that can be owned. As you grow the business and the revenues grow, the entity becomes larger. So, how many shares or units should I have? And this is my empirical knowledge being passed on to you. 10 million. 10 million. 10 million shares is what you should incorporate into and memorialize onto the state documents of whatever state you decide to incorporate in. In Arizona, when you incorporate, you're going to go to the Arizona Corporation, Google it, Commission, and they're going to have a field there that's going to say new businesses or incorporating, how to. And you're going to fill out the paperwork, and you fill out the founders and the members of the organization. You're going to fill out whether it's an LLC or whether it's an S Corp. And I've had people ask me, Aaron, what is it? What do you prefer? Do you prefer an LLC or do you prefer an S Corp, and why? Well, it's a fair question. I'm a little more old school. I prefer the articles of incorporation, which is an S Corp. I prefer that. It costs a little bit more. And every year you have to file your articles of incorporation. You have to file your annual report, I should say, not your articles of incorporation. Every year you have to file your annual report. And it costs $45. But it's all psychological. I prefer to have the ink behind my corporation instead of LLC. And I prefer to talk in shares instead of units. But there's a real convenience factor to having an LLC. And you can always convert later to an S Corp. I just prefer an S Corp. You're going to have a lot of lawyers and individuals that are going to say an LLC is fine, and they're absolutely right. An LLC is sufficient.
I happen to be partial to the S Corp for those two cosmetic reasons. One is that it's got shares instead of units, and the other is that I prefer to see the Inc. instead of the LLC behind my corporation. There is a third, and again, I mentioned it earlier, but that's that there's about 80 or 90 years of case law behind an S Corp or behind a corporation than there is with an LLC. Those are relatively new. Those are relatively new. Well, now you have established your enterprise. You have established and memorialized your business, which means that you have come up with a name with the state. Meaning that when I say you have established and memorialized, that means that you have 10 million shares or units, and on the documents it's going to say how many shares do you want authorized. And it's going to be 10 million. So you establish the ownership structure, which is the equity. You establish the ownership structure and the equity of the founders. You also, again, we're working backwards here from step 4. You have established a working model of beta. You've gone through that proof of concept. You had also created the story, right? Right after that, you created the story once you realized this thing worked. And it was in the form of a business map, not a business plan, but a business map. And you've come a long way from your ideation stage. Ideation in beta is a huge step. It's like climbing, it's like swimming with fins. You've gone from swimming with floaties to taking the floaties off, and now you're swimming with fins and you're cooking with gas now. You're moving. That's a big step. 98%, in my opinion, of all businesses, potential businesses, stop right there. I don't know how many ideas we have in the course of a month about a new business, but I'm here to tell you there's a lot of them. And when you don't act on them, and then you see them, that's a shame. We now know the next step, which is to do the beta. And does the beta have to be perfect? Does the beta have to be perfect? Meaning the model. No. No, it doesn't. I believe that Mark Zuckerberg has somewhere on the walls of his organization of Facebook, I believe that he has something that says, better launched than perfect. Meaning he'd rather have it out in the marketplace imperfect than to have it perfectly built and then launch it. Because as my business partner states, in the quest for perfection, you lose momentum. And Zuckerberg gets that. Better to be in the marketplace and launch and imperfect than to try to perfect this thing. Think of the iPhone 5S. What happened to it? When people got it, there was something wrong with the antenna. People were getting dropped calls left and right. It wasn't in a perfect
position. Maybe it was the 4. iPhone 4. I don't remember, but I do remember that they fixed the problem thereafter after they sold 10 million phones. So they had money coming in and they were fixing the problem versus spending money and trying to fix something that they didn't even know was a problem. Or going to be that big of a problem. Well, Aaron, can I raise money now? Yes! Now you can start raising money. Only after you have determined your valuation. Wait a minute. You just said I can raise money. Yes. Now that you've gone through these 4 steps, now you can start looking at raising money, but you have to put a valuation onto it. And now that you've gone through the proof of concept and you have incorporated, you have investors that will actually invest into a real business. It's not pie in the sky stuff anymore. It's a real entity. What's the valuation going to be based off of your beta? Now here's the thing. You remember me telling you about the projections? If you have projections associated with an idea or a concept, they're just projections. They're just made up numbers. An 8-year-old can make up numbers on a spreadsheet. But now that you've gone through the proof of concept, you really understand the relevant size of your market. You really understand the relevant size of your market. And now your numbers mean more than they did 3 months ago when the prototype hadn't been built. How's that? And the valuation is going to be subjective. Valuation is going to be subjective. What do you have plans for? Let me give you an example. So, about 2 years ago, my wife and I were at dinner. I probably had one too many drinks. And I said to her, well, hey, babe, you know what they should have here in this restaurant? We were at a Mexican restaurant locally here in town called Zocalo. Spelled with Z-O-C-O-L-O. El Zocalo. And in the back patio, if any of you have been there, the back patio there in Chandler, it's a really lush, beautiful garden, and you're eating in it, and I thought they should have a gnome. And I said, they should have an Hispanic gnome, though, back here. I'm of Mexican descent. I'm at a Mexican restaurant. They should have Hispanic gnomes. And I looked at my wife, and I got that look that, no, there are no such thing as Hispanic gnomes. And I said to her, wait a minute. There are Hispanic gnomes, right? And she said, no, Aaron, there are. She said, no, senor, Aaron. Just kidding. She said, no, Aaron, they don't have Hispanic gnomes. And I said, they do now. And she said, what are you going to call it? And I said, I don't know. She said, why don't you call it a nombre? Gnome and ombre together. And I said, boom. Fantastic. That was the idea. And you know what? I sat on that for a year. Sat on it for a year. I told my brother-in-law and my sister about it. And they said, oh my gosh, let's do it. And I said, do what? Let's make it. And I started thinking, do the beta? Me? I'm an investor. I'm an angel. I'm the king maker. I'm not the king. They said, yeah, let's do it. So I don't have time, but it is a great idea in my mind. I wonder if other people will like this. We went through the entire process of what I just taught you, from idea to beta, and we created a prototype, and we launched Nombre on Kickstarter. I created 3 prototypes, had an illustrator draw one out, went through a month of changes, had a prototype made, took another 3 months, 2 months, and then decided it's time to see if anybody even wants one of these things. Does anybody even like this? Gonna like it like I like it? So I had to go through the proof of concept. I made the beta, but now I have to actually see if people want it. So I went on to Kickstarter. That's right. I went on to Kickstarter, and we're going to be talking about crowdfunding because that's real time and it's relevant to today's entrepreneurs. Crowdfunding is a wave of the future. I was accepted onto Kickstarter, and I said, well, I don't know how much people are going to like this thing. Or not. I mean, I love it. I want to sell, I'd love to sell, I thought, I'd love to sell like $1 million worth of these on Kickstarter, but I thought, I don't even know, let's be modest. So I said, okay, let's try $3,500. And that way, if it looks like it's going to fail, I don't mind writing the check and buying a bunch of them myself, and that way I can tell everybody it succeeded. Well, I launched on Kickstarter around February 14th of 2012, the Nombre. And bam, sales started coming immediately. And I thought, who in the heck are these people? Who's buying these things? By the end of the week, I had $3,500 raised. I had met my goal, and I had 33, 34 days to meet $3,500. It plowed forward. And I ended up raising a total of about $11,500 in 1 month, or a little more, 33 days. Some of that money came in the mail through a check. Some elderly people didn't know how to use the internet or didn't trust paying over the credit card, and they saw it on Kickstarter, and they sent me a letter saying, here's my check, send me some Nombres. I went through the proof of concept, and then we incorporated because we realized that we actually had a potential business. And then we created 2 more gnomes. We created 2 more gnomes based on a survey and popular demand of my friends. And my Jewish buddy said, Aaron, you got to make a Jewish gnome. And I had a bunch of other buddies say, hey, you got to make a Japanese gnome, you got to make a Indian gnome, you got to make et cetera, et cetera. So we launched Shalom Gnome on Kickstarter in November, December 2012. He's been a huge hit. We also launched our Scottish gnome wearing a kilt gnome heart in that same time frame. And now we're building out Ninja Gnome. Yeah. And Geisha Gnome. And Om Gnome. And the Gnome Ranger, and Gnome Rita. Yes, we have female gnomes. You don't see female gnomes. And now we've come up with a valuation, and in my mind, it's worth a certain number. In my mind, it's worth a certain number. And we're going to talk about the exit, which is tied to the valuation. Tomorrow at 1 p.m., same channel, same time. Any questions? You can go to Kickstarter.com and you can see Gnome Break. You can also see Shalom Gnome. You can see both of those skits, and you'll see me in a much different light. Anyways, without any further ado, appreciate the time. We'll see you tomorrow, 1 p.m.